The part of my job that I enjoy the most is the value-added analysis, where I follow the data to find which teachers are producing the greatest growth. And we've done it at a number of different grade levels. This time we looked at kindergarten teachers who beat the odds, and the data led me to Emily. Once we found out that a teacher has beat the odds over a 3-year period, then we asked that individual if they'd like to participate in a research study so we could help other teachers learn what's effective. So I put together a graph that shows simply how you look at value added as a difference from expectation. And on this graph, 0 would be the expected growth. And what I plotted was each school, elementary school in Bloomington. And so you can see there are schools that had an average of maybe 3 points less than expected, all the way up to a school that has over 4 points greater growth than expected. Well, that school that has over 4 points greater growth than expected is Indian Mounds. So the school at Indian Mounds is producing higher learning in literacy than the average school in Bloomington. And then we can see that Emily's classroom over the last 3 years has produced 6 units of growth greater than expected. So the value added of 6 units of growth suggests that students are making approximately half a year extra growth in a year's amount of time in kindergarten. We're in a building that has a high degree of success in students moving from wherever they start at kindergarten to the highest levels possible, and that Emily, as part of that team, has had even more success over the last 3 years. The instructional leadership that a principal can provide is a big element of successful teaching.
Our principal, Joan Mayland, is very supportive of what we're doing as teachers in the classroom. The staff here at Indian Mounds is also a huge positive for me.
You know, that concept of servant leadership, I really love that concept, that I'm here to make their day better, because I think when we have happy teachers, we have happy students, and that's the goal. When you see kids come into this building, they're running into the building. And I think that that is really a fun thing. And then, you know, sometimes we'll see kids skipping down the hallway, and I think, you know what? We're just gonna let them skip, because that's pretty fun that this kid is so happy to be at school that they're skipping down the hallway. We're fortunate enough to have extra resources in the building in terms of instructional paras. We use our instructional paras for instruction. So our paraprofessionals are not running off papers, they're not cutting out letters. We try to put most of our resources at the primary grades, so we have a full house in kindergarten and first and second grade so that we can really build those foundational skills. Once the reading groups are determined, that really determines how many paraprofessionals we put in each classroom, and they rotate through the kindergarten classrooms. Also, part of that is our social worker goes in and runs a group, and sometimes our psychologist goes in and runs a social emotional learning group within the reading groups. So there's a lot of people who are in and out of those classrooms. The students get very used to having a lot of adults in the classroom. When students now need a new intervention, if it's a paraprofessional who's going to be working with the students on that intervention, that we train them on the intervention, so that we're not just saying, go do this with students, and that we don't really give them a deeper understanding of what it is that they're supposed to be doing with those students.
Oh, what letter? Tell me the sound. Try it again. D, D, Y. D, D, dinosaur.
Emily teaches at a school that really has a lot of challenges. It serves an at-risk population of students. Not all of the students that Emily has in her class have had a solid preschool experience. Many of them are coming from backgrounds that have been influenced by traumatic situations. They may be homeless, and some are bringing assets with them like a second language, but that can also affect their ability to learn to read in English as well.
Setting up some of those independent stations that are technology-based is a lot of work at the beginning of the year. A lot of the children coming in have never seen a computer or an iPad and may or may not know how to use a mouse or that an iPad is a touch screen. I spend a couple of weeks just teaching them how to plug in the headphones and find the right app that they are supposed to be working on. We also spend a lot of time learning how to use a mouse on the computer. Another challenge is just making sure that students know how to do school, is what we call it. So they know things like lining up in a line, walking in the classroom, rotating from one station to the other, raising their hand. That's our first 6 weeks of kindergarten is spent on those routines.
We really could feel like this is a struggle day in and day out, but we really look for those small successes and we really celebrate those small successes, and we look at a classroom like Emily's and the other classrooms in this building and we see growth. These are our kids, and if not us, then who is going to take care of these kids? And so we just roll up our sleeves and we get the job done.
I think one of the primary strategies that Emily uses is small group instruction that's really targeted to students' differing needs.
So we have 5 different stations that students rotate through in small groups. One of them is with me, one is with a paraprofessional that's usually focusing on a phonics skill or reading skill. The third station is with another either volunteer or the social worker from our building doing different activities with them. We always have a station that has iPads where they're doing a reading game or a letter knowledge game. And then they're on the computer doing a website called Starfall that also focuses on letters and sounds.
Some of the effective things that Emily includes in her instruction are very clear learning targets that communicate to students what they're expected to know and do. She also uses the gradual release of responsibility model. You get some specific modeling from the teacher to make the processes that you're learning about clear, and then you have an opportunity to practice with support, with teacher prompting and coaching, and then you have an opportunity to apply the skill yourself individually.
The way Emily works with small groups in her classroom is that they are flexible small groups, so that if a student is in the classroom in a small group during her group time and she can see that the student now has outgrown that group, or perhaps the student needs to be moved to a different group, she's always keeping an eye on flexible learning and moving the students into the different groups. Maybe she needs even to have a student that has a group of their own. So she has been really smart, really effective and efficient about utilizing the resources as far as staff goes and creating smaller groups, creating bigger groups, depending on what the need is.
Since we started using Orton Gillingham a few years ago, our reading scores really skyrocketed. We're using it in both small groups and large groups, as a whole team and individually, and it's really helped a lot. About 5 years ago, we started social emotional curriculum within the kindergarten classrooms, both during station time and also in large group time, and that has really helped us work on the whole child and developing not only their academics, but also their social emotional abilities. I try and use specific reinforcement for students so that I'm not just saying great job, but I'm also making sure that they know exactly what they're doing that is positive. Bubbles, you're right, Giselle, that's the name of the book. When it's reading a book, I make sure that I ask them how that relates to their life, and that really helps with their engagement in the topic. Have you ever blown bubbles before?
Uh-huh.
Did you just do like the normal bubbles with the container?
I was impressed with the level of rigor of the assignments that were taking place, and obviously they really enjoy her as a teacher and really respond to her and to the other adults in the room.
Buh. Buh.
B.
Ellie, remember it's for lowercase b, it's the bat and the ball. Uppercase.
What about if we have time later?
Assessment is critical to good teaching. A robust assessment system is really going to consist of a variety of assessments. The BECA serves as a very useful screening tool to identify students who are meeting grade level expectations in kindergarten, as well as students who may be at risk. for difficulty in learning to read. The BAS goes another step forward in helping us really diagnose what students' needs are in terms of reading. And then we have progress monitoring assessments in place to determine how effective the interventions that teachers are implementing are.
When we had a discussion with Joan Malin, she indicated that the assessments that they have developed as a team are a large component of the effectiveness of the kindergarten team.
So this is the Indian Mounds guided reading binder, and this was born out of a lot of discussion with our whole staff together, talking about how do we determine where students are, what their strengths are, and then using the information from press, we designed what's called a reading skills checklist, and it's chronological in nature. So it starts with oral language, and then we go into phonemic awareness, and we've broken down phonemic awareness into all the different steps that students need to develop to actually get to a point where we can start teaching phonics. And phonics is broken down into all the different divisions of what students need to learn in order to develop their phonics skills. Different phonemic awareness, for instance, rhyming recognition has an assessment attached to it. And then the teacher can do a quick assessment, and if that actually is firm with a student, they move on to the next. Then the next component of phonemic awareness, for instance, would be rhyming production and so on. So if we can see that a student has those skills firmly in place, we know we don't need to be spending time teaching that. So then when we see where the struggle begins with the students for their reading, then that's where we know this is where we begin our instruction. And the names are listed along the side here, so that once a classroom teacher is done, she has or he has, their entire class has been assessed, then they can see how we need to divide these kids into reading groups depending on what the need is. So we can individualize the groups that way. So this is the progress monitoring chart that we've done. And you can see from this example here that this student, every time we've progress monitored, is really making good progress. Well, at some point, they are firm with rhyming, and now we know we don't have to stay with rhyming. We can move on to the next component of reading, syllables. And so now we can see that the student started here and also has made great progress for syllables. And now we're going to move on to VC words. And so, but we share this information with students and they can see that steady progress. So what a nice visual for students to be able to say, I'm really doing a great job. And for those kids who may have taken a dip for whatever reason, there's some regression there, we remind students, well, you didn't get there yet. Once we put students into reading groups, then during the reading group time, the small reading group time, which is called guided reading, we have a sheet here that the teachers keep on each student, and they write anecdotal notes in here, and they watch for comprehension and they watch for fluency, and so that every day when they meet with the groups, they can keep notes here so that they know how the student is progressing, and they also know what they need to do if the student needs to go back and rework on a different skill. The other thing that we really liked about this when we designed this is that any student that has any kind of reading intervention, we put that at the very top here so that as the teacher is working with the student in their small reading groups, they're also remembering to keep aligning the intervention that the student is working on at a different time during their day. It was really an interesting discussion. We were all sitting in the media center together and we were all brainstorming different ways to create this, and so it was really a team effort with teacher leaders sitting in there and trying to figure out how do we put something together that's teacher friendly so that we can explain this thing to the staff at large and they can take that and go with it. We talk about teaching the whole child, and we talk about that means really engaging the parent, that the parent is a partner with us with educating their child. And so one of the things that we do at the beginning of the school year is we use this Fontes and Pinnell text level ladder of progress. And so we show parents, because we test students at the beginning of the school year using the BAS, and we determine what reading level they're at. And so we put a mark on there. And so if, for instance, a student is in second grade, they should be reading in this area right here. But after we've tested them if they're reading below grade level, when we meet with parents during the fall parent conferences, we can show them this is where your student should be during second grade, and this is where your student is, and then we're going to provide resources for the parents to work on at home as well, so that they're working with their children in tandem with what the teachers are doing during the school day. The visuals are amazing. I've had so many parents since we started using this, and we started doing this about 3 years ago, say to me, I had no idea what my student's reading level was. And so it gives them an opportunity to be an active participant in trying to help us get their student to where they need to be.
Okay. You're doing a great job.
But Emily inspires me because in her quiet, understated way, she's doing the hard work.
We're not born having all of the skills that we need to read. It truly is one of the most complex processes.
I'm so encouraged that we have discovered once again a teacher who is producing exceptional growth with her students using the best practices that you read about in the literature and you don't always get a chance to observe in person.